Hi, it's KCCK's Culture Crawl. I'm Dennis Green, and my guests today are from the upcoming concert production and debut premiere of John Rapson's final work, Esteban and The Children of the Sun. Joining me live in studio are Caleb Rainey and Tara McGovern. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi.
And joining me remotely from northern Minnesota, Kevin?
Yes, sir.
Is the legendary Kevin B.F. Burt, who is also a part of this, and I'm really pleased that we're able to get all this put together.
Yes.
So this is obviously an impactful and emotional project because it was John's final work that he completed shortly before he passed away this summer. And before we talk about that, let's talk about the story just a little bit, because you have the first live production of it is coming up at the Englert Theater on October
3rd. Sunday, October 3rd.
Sunday, October 3rd. And Tara, since you've been a part of the last several of John's productions, you're the violinist that all of us remember from Hot Tamale Louie,
Thank you.
as well as many other things. So you've worked with John on these projects, for many years now.
Yes.
So tell me about how, when he first said, I have this idea for this, I found another story.
Yes.
Because we all know the story of how he read the article in the New Yorker about Zarif Khan, and that was what became Hot Tamale Louie. And he had a similar experience with this story, which dives even farther back into history, the 1500s.
Yes. It was very exciting for all of us to know that there was another story in the works, and it was in the works for quite a few years. And I think he began looking at the Cabeza de Vaca story, but then as he learned more about Esteban, he became much more interested in Esteban as an individual and the historical context of Esteban's story. And so he pivoted and really wanted to consider Esteban a central character and to tell that story and to consider the modern context of telling a story that we previously don't hear often.
So the first part of the story is that's the shipwreck, right?
Oh,
no?
Let's see. How far back do we go?
Caleb, as the script developer, you're probably the most cognizant of all the moving pieces of the narrative part of the story.
For sure. And so we actually kind of start with Esteban's beginning life, right? And moving just slightly, we mention this possible choice he made to go into slavery, and then that slavery choice leading him across the ocean, right? And so it kind of covers most of Esteban's life. It's covering pretty much all of it, leading to the becoming of his masters becoming a slave with him, and their escape and what they do after that. It is a whole kind of story of Esteban. So this story really shifts away from the original inciting inspiration and really focuses on this one man.
Yeah. So the inciting incident. This was the ship arrived or crashed on the coast of Florida earlier, in the 1500s. So one of the first probably couple dozen vessels to reach the new world from Spain.
Yeah, and we're giving Esteban kind of this title of probably the first black documented slave to be in the Americas, right? And this is so early on that so little is unsettled. And there's even the quote is that some Native Americans said the first white man they met was a black man, right? Because Esteban would be sent out to be kind of this liaison. And so those kind of moments are monumental and also so far back in our history, and yet we don't know them. And that's some of the work the script does, is kind of name that too, right? How do we still not know some of these black stories that are essential? These slave masters, the people who brought him over, don't survive without him, right? Need him. And yet we often don't celebrate this story in the way that we should.
So, Terry, you've been working with John for quite a while. Kevin, when did you come in on this?
In on it as a conversation and an invitation that if this comes to fruition, I'd like you to be a part of it. It was kind of how it started. And when he told me the story, initially, like I said, the initial story of just the conquistadors, it sounded very cool. But then the second conversation that we had moved more toward Esteban, and that was remarkably intriguing. And so if this came to fruition, he wanted me to be a part of it, write some songs. And so, yeah, that sounds great. As it began to develop, he said, I also want you to kind of be a narrator, because your ability to tell might come in handy. Is there anybody that you'd like to work with, that you could suggest? And Caleb was my one and only. Yeah. Yeah.
Caleb, your resume calls you a spoken word poet. So talk to me about the script. How, is it more verse? Is it more narrative conversation?
For sure.
A combination of all of that?
We really wanted, John and I talked a lot, right? Because I am a spoken word poet, and I was like, what are you wanting from this, right? And eventually we got to the idea of it being a dialogue, which at first it was going to just be me doing some kind of monologue-esque things. But then we were like, well, we want Kevin involved. And there's this interesting conversation that Kevin and I can have, being generationally different, but of the same time, talking about a story of a whole different time, right? And so we started changing this into a dialogue. And for most of it, it is kind of not like witty back and forth. It's short, it's fun. Kevin and I have worked together many, many years, and so we have a rapport, and it's really written as Kevin and Caleb having a conversation, and one of us knows this story and one of us doesn't, right? But at the same time, we do have a few kind of longer moments in which each of us, Kevin and I, have moments of clarity, of monologue, of exposition, of really commenting on what does it mean that we have this story of Esteban, right? And what do we do with it? And what are some complications in this story? So it has its lyrical moments, but for the most part, it's dialogue. It is having this real conversation, and really for the audience, it's supposed to be an idea in which they sit in on two contemporary black men tackling a black story. What does that look like? And there's levity, there's laughter in it, and then there's also some seriousness.
Of course, we don't get Kevin Burt involved without asking him to contribute a song or two.
Or four.
As well. And we'll talk about that process in a minute, but let's talk about the music, Tara, because you have been involved with John, on the music end of this, and before we rolled tapes, you both allowed that the scripting and the music has kind of been proceeding a little bit on different tracks, and you are now coming together for the very first time.
Coming together.
So talk to me about the composition process.
Well, I am not one of the composers, but we do have 4 composers involved in this project. John Rapson, of course, who also did all of the orchestration and arrangements. With one exception, I arranged one traditional song that I sing. And then the 3 other composers are, of course, Kevin Burt, who we could not have done this project without, Miguel Espinoza, who's a flamenco guitarist from Colorado, who will be here for the performance, along with 3 other Colorado musicians in his band, and then Nielo Gaglione, who worked with us on Hot Tamale Louie.
Yeah, he was very instrumental in bringing different,
Absolutely.
different flavors and different influences.
Because the
to
instrument
music.
that Nielo plays is a North African mandol, and then he also, where he grew up in Port-au-Bouc, France, there's a lot of international flavor to the music that he grew up playing before he moved to the United States.
You have recorded an album, which we will be able to hear some of here in just a little bit. When did that take place? Before John passed or after?
We are very fortunate that John was a part of the album. He was with us for the whole recording process. We wrapped on June 21st, and we lost John on July 21st.
Wow.
And so that recording took place actually in John's daughter Hannah's beautiful Rose Hill house. We did all of the recording in the basement. It was a very unusual recording setting, but we had an amazing audio engineer, John Speck, working with us on that. And we did the recording over the course of 3 days. We were just so fortunate and grateful to be able to complete that with John.
What was your sense of what this was like for John as he was playing for what I'm sure he probably realized was going to be maybe the last time?
Yeah, so it's really fun to answer this question with somebody that knew John well, because all of us that knew John and worked with him know that the way that he lived and the way that he worked, it was all very much compatible. He was very plugged in to meaning in his life and to connection in his life. And so the idea of John not working all the way up to his dying, it would be unfathomable.
What else would he have done?
Exactly. So John, I don't think any of us took that time for granted, and we certainly felt very fortunate and lucky that the family was so inviting of the musicians being part of those last days. And I know that it was something that took a lot of energy from John, but I know that he really prioritized wanting to get this project done. And so, yeah, it was magical and bittersweet and difficult and precious.
Kevin, you composed 4 songs for this?
Yes.
And, of course, you're no stranger to songwriting, but this is a little bit of a different process than you usually do.
Well, yes and not. I mean, the one thing is that for me, it's remarkably intimidating to know that I'm coming from a perspective of someone who can speak a language but doesn't know how to write it, and translate exactly what I'm hearing or what I'd like to hear, to be able to translate it to someone else. The beauty of it is that's entirely John. That's John's world. And so when I sent him my raw songs, they became these larger than life representations of moments. You know, the other odd thing for me was I'm writing blues songs about a moment before blues existed. And so from a cultural perspective, it felt special for me to be able to connect, you know, special and weird at the same time, because the things that I know to write about applied then. The story it's been repetitive for more years than we know, and it's still conversations that should have started way back when, but still haven't been had. And so that's the thing that makes this for me remarkably special is that, you know, I get to be connected with a story that starts before we start our history here. And that, you know, that for me, that was huge. I mean, that's, you know, that's the beauty of it is the beauty. And I guess a piece of ugly too, is that the stories that I decided to create about the moments that Esteban lived through still apply, and have relevance as a story right now.
The program is Esteban and the Children of the Sun, the story of arguably the first black man to migrate from the old world to the new world.
Yeah.
The music composed and conceived by the late John Rapson, and it's just such a pleasure to have the three of you to tell us the story behind this. The show will debut on October 3rd at the Englert Theater. Tickets are still available, and I just can't wait to see this come to life. And I know that I know John is watching all of you right now and going, you guys are going to nail it. I know you are.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Kevin.
Hey, man, appreciate the opportunity to share the story, man.
Again, October 3rd at the Englert Theater, and the album will be available as time goes on.
The album will be there on that day.
So you'll be able to get the album as well at the concert, and it's certainly something, of course, that you will have heard and will be hearing on KCCK as time goes on. Thank you all for being here again.
Thank you, Dennis.
Hey, big love, everybody.
You can hear The Culture Crawl live on the radio many weekdays at 10:20, or download the podcast, watch or listen on your own schedule at kcck.org/culture, or however you get your podcasts. I'm Dennis Green, and I'll talk to you later.